presentation. So take it away.
Absolutely. Okay, greetings everyone again. So I am here tonight along with Paula Latito, our budget director for the district, to go over the Fair Student Funding budget presentation for everyone tonight. During this presentation, you'll learn a little bit about what the overall allocation is in terms of Fair Student Funding for New York City, but also directly connected to District 25. You'll see a little bit about the weights that come alongside the funding allocation that goes to each school, but also directly related to each student in the district, and how there are certain weights that come along with if you are a child that has that's an English language learner, if you're a child that has an IEP. Each of those comes with their own weight, so I'll talk to you a little bit about that as well tonight. So let me see why this is not blowing up to full size. Yeah, why is it not going full size?
It's PDF.
It's a PDF, yeah. Okay, perfect. That's good. I can go from.
Yeah, and then the arrows.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to review the New York City Public School and District budget. We're going to review Fair Student Funding, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to see a school budget webpage so that you have an idea of what that looks like, even for your own school. So I'm going to bring you through the process of where you find it, what buttons you have to click on. Remember, this is recorded, so you can always go back as a parent, and Paula is here in the event that I forget to share something or wants to embellish on something that I've already said to add into tonight's discussion. So you're going to see an overall of this year's New York City Public Schools budget and the specific budget for our district, a detailed explanation of Fair Student Funding formula, and a walkthrough of the web pages that are associated with that. You're going to hear a little bit about where our funding comes from, how our budget is spent, district-specific budget, and school-specific budget information. So where does our funding come from? So this data is based on the most recent budget included in the mayor's January plan. Total budget for 24-25 school year was $41.2 billion. Or about $32,000 per capita in our system. New York City provides most of the funding for 25-26 school year. The city will contribute $24 billion, or 59% of the total budget on education. Most of our city funding comes from what we call city tax levy dollars. City tax levy dollars are drawn from local taxes, including property taxes, sales taxes, and personal income taxes. Every year, the mayor proposes the amount of city tax levy funding we get, and the city council must pass the budget into law before the fiscal year begins on July 1. $15 billion, or 36%, comes from New York State funding. Funding from New York State is our second largest funding source. Every year, the governor proposes the amount of state funding that we will get, mainly based on the number and type of students enrolled in our schools. And then the state legislature must pass the budget into law. The new fiscal year begins on May 1. Funding generally comes from income and corporate taxes, as well as property and sales taxes. We also have one final piece of funding that comes from the federal government, which comprises a total of about $2 billion, or 5% of our funding of this school year. The federal government is our third largest funding source. Every year, Congress proposes a budget, and the president must sign the budget into law in advance of the new fiscal year, which begins October 1. The Every Student Succeed Act provides the rules for allocating most of the federal funding we receive. So what you see here is a breakdown of how these dollars are allocated across New York City schools, and you'll see those allocations on the left-hand side of the pie graph. You have K-12 schools and instruction, early childhood, employee and pension benefits, debt payments, charters, non-public and contract schools, central administration, and superintendent and field offices. So in terms of employee benefits, pension, and debt, there's an allocation of $12.1 billion that pays for health care, pension payments, and debt payments on loans for school construction and upgrades. Charters are allocated 8% or $3.4 billion allocated for charter schools as mandated by state law. Non-public and contract schools, that's non-public and contract school payments, covers schools and programs that educate New York City students but are not directly run by the Department of Education. This totals of $2.3 billion. This includes students with disabilities attending specialized schools and supplemental services to students attending non-public schools. Superintendent offices comprise approximately 1% of the overall budget. School operations section pays for non-instructional services that students receive. $5.2 billion goes to free breakfast and lunch, bus routes, and loan payments on buildings for new construction and renovation, similar to what a mortgage payment would be. Also allocate $1.9 billion to support early childhood for birth to 5 across New York City. And lastly, the largest proportion of our budget is allocated towards K-12 schools and instruction. $15.8 billion is allocated annually to support schools, including general education teachers, counselors, deans, health and climate initiatives such as gym teachers, Respect for All, climate action days, special education, after-school programs, textbooks, computers, and so on. So looking at it through the lens of District 25, so District 25 and 24-25, budget allocation was $644 million. And you can see on the right-hand side of the pie graph, a large portion of that comes from fair student funding, followed by our other state and federal dollars that comes to us, whether it's through Title I or other federal grants like Title III, which our schools also receive for our English language learners. And state contract for excellence money is another portion of funding that comes to our schools on a year-to-year basis. But this is what accounts for the $644 million that comes that came to District 25 in this school year. So the New York City does a great job of making all of this information transparent to our families, and everyone can access what your own school's budget looks like right on the school site. So I'm going to quickly go into the New York City Schools page really quickly, just so that you can see what this looks like in real time. And you can't see my screen, which is not good. Hold on, let me try to exit the other one.
Stop sharing.
What's that? Stop share?
Yeah.
Why is that doing that?
You share just the window,
Oh.
not the full screen.
Gotcha.
Go to desktop.
Okay. So we have our regular New York City page. Up on the top, you'll see where it says Find a School. This is where any parent can go and locate their building right on the regular DOE site. So when you click Find a School, just as an example, Q020, and it'll pop up what the location for that building is. And then we hit search. And this is making a liar out of me because it doesn't want to open. Hold on.
Click this search box again?
No, I got it.
I got it.
Yeah. You click on the school. Sometimes you'll see that they'll populate multiple schools because there are other 20s in New York City. But it'll bring you to this screen. And once you're on this screen, it'll bring you to reports. And then once you're in reports, you'll see budget and finances. When you click in budget and finances, it will give you a breakdown of the resource allocation that's available for each of our schools. And just to bring you quickly through each of these windows, just to give you a little bit of perspective of what you would see. So you'll get the overarching, and this is a little bit small. Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit. You'll see the overarching allocation that that a given school would receive, from what it would mean in terms of collective bargaining agreement allocation, as year to year, because of contractual agreements, salaries will increase, which means also the support for the amount of money a school will receive also needs to be accounted for inside of that space. But you'll also notice that you'll see FSF allocation. The vast majority of funds that our schools will receive will say FSF. That stands for Fair Student Funding. That's coming in large part from New York City. So when you see FSF, it's coming from New York City dollars. Other things like C4E, CFE, that's coming from the state. Other types of things that are coming from the federal government, you'll see it'll say Title I. And I'll show you what that looks like just in a moment, so you have an idea of what you would see as a parent. And these are the types of allocations, and you'll see that there are many different ones that you would see looking at this view. So you'll see 3K for all. So if a school does happen to support 3-year-olds, you'll see what the allocation is for children, for schools that have children that are in the 3K for all program. It will come with a budget allocation. For children that are going into schools for pre-K, it'll come with a budget allocation specifically for those two programs. But you'll also see other types of dollars that are allocated in here, whether for children that have IEP paras, for rollout in terms of contract for excellence dollars. All of the dollar allocations that are accessible are present in here for you to see as a parent, including things like Title I for our Title I schools and the allocation that the school would receive. In addition, it comes with a budget summary, and the budget summary is something that shows you, based on the school and the allocation that they've received, how many positions do we have that are being supported with the dollars that come from the school. In large part, the vast majority of our budgets account for this teaching staff that we have in our building. Obviously, there are other funding sources that we use, but the majority of our dollars do go to supporting staffing inside of our building. This will give you an idea of what the school currently has on each grade level, based on what is in our system. So it's a nice little tool for you guys to review and visit as not only as parents in our general population, but certainly our school leadership team members. It's just a great reference point for you as well. And then they have something called the budget at a glance. This will give you an entire breakdown of each of the allocations that the schools receive in alignment with the demographics that the school has, which is an important part for what I'm going to share with you next, which is getting into the formula and the weights that each of these allocations have. So just bear with me as I now try to refine where it is that I just hid the other document. I will get it for you in just a moment.
In preview, you made it small.
Yeah, I dropped it down.
I saw it on video.
I know, it's terrible. Okay. No, that's not it.
You took it away.
I took it away?
Go back to the
I don't know what's happening to me.
Click on, go back to the doc.
Huh?
Go back to the doc and look for preview.
Yeah, no, it's right here. Where'd it go, though? That's not the right one either.
Go to the doc.
This is why everyone needs a Lewis.
That's it.
We all need
Yeah,
a
what's
Lewis.
that popping up?
It's back there, just hit the show.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, guys. So this is what I just went through is on this particular slide deck. Now, who decides on how the money is spent at the school level? So our principals do have a great deal of flexibility in deciding how funding sources are going to be spent based on student and community needs. This is a very important connection to our school leadership teams, which are made up of staff, of our teachers, DC 37, as well as parent members across our schools, making sure that there is the alignment between our goals and what the budget is currently calling for. So as part of that decision-making at the school leadership team, then it does come to me for me to approve when goals are developed. I will have to approve to make sure that there's alignment between what our schools are saying that they want to get accomplished and the budget allocation that they do have. So what is Fair Student Funding? How does Fair Student Funding work? and what are the proposed weights. So I did kind of go over this part around fair student funding just in my chat as I was going through the individual school example that I provided. But fair student funding in general, as I mentioned, is the largest funding source that we wind up receiving. It's based on the number of students that each of our schools have, plus the specific needs that our kids have. So children that are receiving perhaps set services, or if they're receiving integrated co-teaching, or if they're in special class, they all come with a specific additional dollar amount on top of what the standard dollar amount is that each child receives. And the reason for that is for additional staffing that they might need to incur in order to support those individual needs. So funding sources that also support this type of support for children, Title I, Title III, IDEA, are targeted allocations to support specific initiatives. You'll see things like charters, 3K pre-K, mandated individual IP-related services are funded separately, so it's not part of fair student funding, so schools receive additional allocations for that. And District 75 programs are also funded separately inside of our schools. And funding is provided based on a class model, not a student per capita for D75. So fair student funding provides schools with flexibility, as I mentioned, to support the individual needs inside of our schools. So what does this look like? So 4 building blocks combined to create each school's fair student funding allocation. There's a foundation dollar amount that is of the amount of $225,000 that each school starts with just on its own end. There's collective bargaining that goes into it, per capita dollar amount, the number of students and their needs, and that eventually equals the fair student funding allocation that each building will wind up receiving. So this is all based on the weights that come for each kid, for each child, excuse me, which I'm going to show you briefly here. And what you'll see for the 25-26 proposed weights, it all begins dependent on the grade level. So grade level weight for kindergarten through fifth grade, it starts at the basis of a 1. So every student gets the base allocation, which in last year was over $4,200. Every child comes with that base dollar amount for elementary school. For children in grades 6 through 8, that base amount is 1.08, and for high schools, it's 1.03. What you'll see on this left-hand side are academic interventions. So there are additional weights that come for poverty. There's additional weights for children below standards, well below standards, graduation challenges. You'll see weights for students in temporary housing, standalone English language learners, both in elementary and middle to high school, bilingual programs, special education programs. Each of them come with, and you can see there's a variation within the context of their weights, dependent on the needs that they have. So what do all of these numbers actually now mean? So when you come to this particular example, you'll see how each student can wind up incurring a different dollar amount based on what their needs may be as an individual student, which comes all into play with all kids then being added together to come up with a fair student funding allocation for each school. So for example, when we have the AVA on the left-hand side, you'll see that the allocation for AVA is different for Miles. So AVA is coming from an elementary school. And again, maybe not the images might not necessarily show exactly their age group that they're in. But AVA coming from elementary school starts with that basis of a 1, where she would receive the initial allocation required for all students. Then she will receive for the special education services that she needs an additional weight of 1.74 to support the services necessary to meet the expectations of the IEP. Then you'll see that Ava is not only a child that fits into the general student category, but also receives special needs allocation, but is also a student who is an English language learner. So there's an additional weight that is added for that additional support. You'll also see here that Ava also is in need of academic intervention. So there will be an additional point .12 that's added to that weight, so that Ava is also receiving some of those dollars to support academic intervention. Also a student that's in temporary housing, as well as the space of concentration of needs funding that is available for Ava. So you'll see that an individual student can fit into multiple categories based on the funding formula, which means that one student to the next will be given a different allocation based on those needs. So as an example of what that might mean, now Miles is a student who starts off with a base allocation of 1.08, also receives special education services, and depending on what that might be, whether it's set services, ICT, or special class, will come with a different weight scale for children, which is why you see a 0.56 added to Miles and the funding that will come to Miles. Miles is also an English language learner who gets a 0.55 weight, also in need of academic intervention, a 0.35 weight, and is also a student in temporary housing. So each of these wind up creating what Miles would wind up receiving per capita for him as an individual student. Now, what does that translate into in terms of a funding allocation? So given the idea of a $4,254 base allocation for each child, these two children would receive additional allocations based on their needs. So Ava would receive a $13,742 allocation per capita because of the needs that she has, and Miles would receive an $11,317 allocation based on his needs and the funding formula that was presented to you just a few moments ago. Paula, did I hit all of that on the head? Is there anything else that I didn't mention there?
We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Paula. Oh, Louis, can you unmute your mom?
You had to put him on the spot there.
Okay. No,
There we go.
Dr. Mike, you did a fantastic job. I mean, everything you said was to the point. Like I said, it hasn't really changed over the years, except for the new web pages, which are very helpful and informative, but I actually did a great job.
Awesome. Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So you can find an overview of the New York City Public Schools budget on the New York City Public School website, found under About Us and Funding Our Schools. The link is accessible to you. You can also find the following online on the New York City Public Schools Info Hub under Reports and Financial Data and Reports. Detailed information about each and every school budget allocation in the form of a school allocation memorandum. And this is important for everyone to realize. Not every funding source can be used for everything that you want. They all come with a memorandum that indicates how those dollars can be used and what they should be used for inside of our schools. So Title I dollars come with certain expectations for how they will be used, different from Fair Student Funding, where Fair Student Funding can be used for mostly everything. Title I does come with certain things that it should be used for inside of our buildings. And those allocation memorandum are available for you guys to look at to see how they can be used inside of our schools. There's also a guide for Fair Student Funding, as well as a Fair Student Funding allocation that's calculated for each school. I do recommend for our families, those that are interested in looking at that breakdown, to do what I just showed you how to do on the school site. Always available too for anyone that might be interested in looking at that, that's not sure how to find it even after tonight. Be happy to show you where to find all of that information as well. And you can find the following online on each individual school webpage following the reports and budget and finances information that I shared on slide 3 of the presentation. Fair Student Funding details webpage, bless you.
Bless you.
This is something that I had shared with you guys, bless you. Sneezing on the truth, The website, excuse me, shares the beginning of the school year allocation. That's the initial allocation based on projected register, any mid-year change, and then a final allocation. So funding is based on the October 31st deadline for our schools, for when for students that are inside of our schools. As of that October 31st deadline is when they kind of pull to see how many children that we have. So if there are adjustments that need to be made in our building, schools will receive that additional allocation. If in fact they wind up having 10 more students that came to the school that were beyond their original projection, schools will receive that allocation so that they are brought whole in terms of the dollars that they are intended to receive. School budget at a glance, this I did review with you already. It does give you the total budget per capita, the school funding that's available, the school spending, and the student demographics. This will give you a general idea, particularly around Ls and students with disabilities, around how those allocations were calculated. Obviously, it's more in depth than what you would just see on those slides, because you don't know all of the individual needs of each kid that's in the school, but it gives you a general perspective around how that calculation was made for each building. We are continuing to review the formula to address other concerns we've heard about school budgeting in future years, including challenges related to school size and enrollment shifts. So for those of you that are interested in sharing your feedback, there is an email address that we encourage you to reach out to. That's budgetpubliccomments@schools.nyc.gov, or by phone to 212-374-6754. Comments and questions may be directed between March 7th and April 22nd. So if you do have feedback, we do encourage you to engage in and have your voices heard inside of this process before it does go to the space where it gets voted on at the city council level. So there is that opportunity for our community members to do so. And lastly, just thank you for listening, and certainly if you have any questions, Paula and I are here to answer them as best we can in relation to budget. Yeah.
Title I is when the school has 60% or more student eligible for lunch. And Title VII is the federal grant for bilingual.
Say it again. So Title I, yes, I heard the 60%, yes.
Yeah, Title VII is the federal funding for bilingual.
So Paula, just Title VII, just make sure, I want to make sure that this is accurate. Title VII is for bilingual programs?
The schools aren't allocated Title VII. We have Title III. We have Title III, which is Title III LEP, which is for the ENL, with the, the ENL. And then they receive immigrant funds, but we don't have a Title VII.
That's probably, state directly to the school.
In our
Correct.
district, we don't, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I passed it.
Okay.
Is there a plan for how school budgets are going to increase for the fall for class size law? They're going to have to be hiring probably more teachers in most of the buildings.
Yeah, so our schools engage in a process of looking at their current footprint in their building, the enrollment that they have currently in their schools, and developed a plan to support class size reduction, which is a process that we've just engaged in to review and prepare for September. So provided that there's feasibility and it can happen, there will be an expectation that schools that are approved for this will receive those additional funds so that they can do the hiring that's necessary for their buildings.
Now to figure out what the numbers are going to be for the fall.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So schools will get projections, and based on those projections, then they can decide on how many classes can we create per grade, and then that on top of the physical footprint of the building, how many classes can we generate? We do have a significant number of our schools. It's the majority of our schools that have completed the application to create lower classes inside of our buildings. We will certainly inform you guys as soon as we hear how many of those are going to be receiving that additional allocation to support it moving into next year. So I'm hopeful that will happen. But yes, it will involve for any of those additional classes that are created, it will involve the importance of obviously hiring and creating more opportunities for new staff in our schools, yeah.
Okay, they're not gonna have to stretch what they have like for this year.
No, the
Yeah.
goal would be that, you know, additional dollars, some of our schools, there would, you know, the feasibility based on current budget and the number of classes they would need to add, they wouldn't be able to necessarily stretch what they currently have to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it would
Including
involve
now,
additional
they're ready
funding.
for September.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've already gone through the application process, and our schools are, I've engaged in that review, and then whether or not they'll be approved is on the radar, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll have some answers on that. Okay? So that's an important question.
Any other council members have questions? Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome, Paula, thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so moving into my